Hello, I'm Ted Peters, and our big topic, is going to be sin. Take a look at the cover of this book. You'll see a Magritte apple. I think that was chosen by Bill Erdmans. Bill was the publisher of the book called Sin. And I think Bill wanted to remind us of Adam and Eve, who allegedly ate an apple. I like to distinguish the words sin and evil. Yes, we can use them interchangeably sometimes, but by evil, I want to think about suffering. And of course, suffering could be caused by sin, but maybe by something else, a disease, or we could be a victim of natural evil. But sin is going to be defined in part here as an action that you and I take as a human being that causes somebody else suffering, and that's what evil is. Now, as we get into this subject matter of sin, I don't want to come across as a fire and brimstone preacher pointing to you and making us grovel in the mud as if we're guilty or should feel shame. No, rather, our approach to sin here is going to be one of just trying to understand ourselves. What is it that we're actually doing that we use the word sin to describe? Now, in my theory, Ted's theory, we'll call it, of sin, I cut the subject matter into 7 parts. Actually, I call it 7 steps from innocence to radical evil. And those 7 are anxiety, unfaith, pride, concupiscence, self-justification, cruelty, and blasphemy. That's the 7. And what we're going to do in the next couple of minutes is take a look at anxiety. Anxiety is really not sin. It's more like a fertile garden within which sin grows. I'm going to define anxiety as the fear of nothingness. We do get afraid of certain things from time to time, which is very rational. If you're afraid of getting run over by a speeding bus, you wait on the curb and cross after the bus has passed. That's a reasonable thing to do. And you're afraid of a certain object, namely the speeding bus. Anxiety is like fear, but it doesn't have an object. It's the fear of nothingness. It's the fear of dropping from being into non-being, of dropping from existence into non-existence. At a certain level, of course, we are aware that before we were born, we did not exist. After we die, the world will go on because we won't be existing anymore. And right now, in between, we are slung between birth and death, and there is a tension in our lives. A tension. The need for security, we might call it, but that's kind of a shallow way of dealing with the most profound force at work in our consciousness, anxiety. Well, what is it that Ted is talking about here? Let me try to give a couple of examples. Anxiety over space and time. How about that? Anxiety over space. Well, I'm a professor, and frequently, actually every semester at the beginning, I'm standing in front of the classroom. Students come in, they look around the room, and they find a desk or a chair. And about the 3rd class meeting, every student is in the seat that they will be in for the rest of the semester. It's kind of like home. And without thinking about it, they've identified with that particular chair or desk. It's not unusual for a guest then to say, oh, Dr. Peters, could I sit in on your class today? And I'll say, well, certainly, you just select any seat. The guest sits down. Soon the student who owns the throne comes in, realizes that a stranger is in that chair, and you can just see physically the discombobulation, the disorientation. It only lasts a fraction of a second before the student looks for another place to sit. But in the meantime, anxiety is struck like lightning. I don't have my space. And if I don't have my space, I don't exist, or at least I don't exist as who I am. Anxiety over space. When Adolf Hitler was leading the Nazi Party to take control of Germany in the 1930s, he capitalized on the poisonous boiling of the cauldron of anxiety over space. He said, we Germans need Lebensraum, living space, and we will conquer country after country so that we will have our living space. Anxiety over space can lead to war and death. That's anxiety over space. What about anxiety over time? Well, I, like probably many of you, will go to the grocery store, Safeway, supermarket, put some items in my cart, push my cart toward the cashier's desk, and on occasion, some malevolent culprit, demonic person will cut in front of me, take my place. And I could feel the anger starting in my toes and running right up my body and wanting to come out. And I don't know what you do then, but what I do is I look at my watch. Why? Why would I look at my watch? Well, that person who has just stolen my space has also stolen my time. I, for a fraction of a second, feel like I don't exist. Now, suppose that thief, that culprit, turns and looks me in the eye and says, oh, excuse me, did I cut in line? Then all that anger just kind of goes right back down and out my toes. I'm no longer anxious because the person has acknowledged my existence in time and space, and I say, oh, it's okay, you just go right ahead. Well, thinking again about the 1930s in Europe, Adolf Hitler capitalized also on anxiety over time. He said his nation would become a third Reich, a third kingdom that would last 1,000 years. If you join the Nazi war machine, your kingdom will last 1,000 years. Anxiety over time and space, war, and death. Just a few minutes ago, I got a telephone call from a very good friend, a very accomplished professional, and his corporation just notified him that they would no longer need his services. Got fired. Well, are you worried? I asked him. Are you anxious? Oh, yes, I'm really, really worried. Well, what do you think's going to happen? Well, I'm sure it's going to work out one way or the other. Oh, but you're really anxious, aren't you? Yeah, I am. Well, if Jesus were in that telephone conversation, he would say to my friend, have faith, trust God. God really has your future in God's hands. Don't let the anxiety that you're currently experiencing get a grip on you. You don't want you don't want that anger to come out and express itself. So the antidote to anxiety and anger is actually trust. This is what Jesus tries to tell us in the Sermon on the Mountain again and again. Look at the flowers in the field and the birds in the air and how beautifully they are adorned. How much more precious are you in the eyes of God? Trust God. Don't be anxious. And of course, what I think Jesus means there is don't let the anxiety get a grip on you. Being anxious is natural. We're born with that propensity. But we don't have to respond with anger if we trust the eternal God who governs time and space. That's anxiety. Next segment, we're going to deal with unfaith.